Good morning, all.
Good morning.
So I have the results of a very important test that probably everybody's been wanting to know for all of time living in Southern California. And that test was, who has the best French fries?
Oh boy.
So we commissioned a group of experts yesterday in our church to go around and have French fries from, I think, 6 different places. I will try to go in no, I won't go in alphabetical. There were Wendy's, Arby's, Del Taco, In-N-Out, Chick-fil-A, and McDonald's. I think those were the 6. And so we had our expert commission. The best experts in French fries, as we all know, are junior hires. So they went around and tasted, and you might want to take a guess at what the best French fry is.
McDonald's.
It was unanimous, not McDonald's. In-N-Out were the best French fries. I think there were kind of like 2 tiers. There was In-N-Out and Chick-fil-A were kind of like 1 and 2, and Arby's was kind of up there with the seasoned fries. On the bottom were, well, the rest of them were toward the bottom. I'll leave it at that.
Oh!
Really? I know up till now, French fries has been Daniel's favorite food group, but I think he might be cured of that now. He came home and was like, I don't ever want to eat French fries again. Yeah. So I normally don't bring up things that aren't related to class, but I actually, when I was thinking today, I found a way to connect it. And the way we connect it is, so In-N-Out got the best French fries. And we all know In-N-Out, just their customer service, the way they treat their customers, it's all coming out of their desire to live out their Christian faith, right? And what we're seeing today in the 10 Commandments, it's really that the 10 Commandments were given to be lived out in every area of life. It wasn't just what you did when you went to church. It's what you did when you ran a company. It's what you did when you were at home with your family. It's what you did with employees, what you did with your wives and other people's wives. So what we're going to see today is that the 10 Commandments that we've been looking at in Deuteronomy is really not just isolated commands, but it's meant to be lived out in every area of life. And in Deuteronomy specifically, of course, the 10 Commandments were given up front at the beginning, but almost the whole book of Deuteronomy is an expansion on the 10 Commandments. It's a fleshing out. It's an expansion, extension. Pardon? Application. Yeah, it's application of what God's commanded. It's not trying to address every single particular area, but it gives examples of what that would look like in an area. And I forget what kind of law that is. Maybe legal people. What kind of laws kind of just give examples and then, anyway, doesn't matter. So I want to go back and just have this truth put before us again, that the 10 Commandments, or really God's law, are meant to be observed in every part of life. So if I can get 2 people to read back, we're going to go to Deuteronomy 6 just real quick. I think it's 1 to 3, and then 4 to 9. I'm just going to get 2 people to read these 2. Might jump up. Steve's got it first. And okay, let's hear God's word and just be reminded of how God's commands are supposed to be held in all of life. Okay, go ahead, Steve.
Now this is the commandment, the statutes and the rules that the Lord your God commanded me to teach you, that you may do them in the land to which you are going over to possess it, that you may fear the Lord your God, you and your son and your son's son, by keeping all his statutes and his commandments, which I command you all the days of your life, and that your days may be long. Hear therefore, O Israel, and be careful to do them, that it may go well with you, and that you may multiply greatly, as the Lord, the God of your fathers, has promised you in a land flowing with milk and honey.
Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, and with all your soul, and with all your might. And these words that I command you today shall be on your heart. You shall teach them diligently to your children, and shall talk of them when you sit on your house, and when you walk by the way, and when you lie down, and when you rise. You shall bind them as a sign on your hand, and they shall be as frontlets between your eyes. You shall write them on the doorposts of your house and on your gates.
Okay. So yeah, hopefully you heard that admonition that the Ten Commandments were to be all around us, all around the Israelites, all throughout their day, in their conversations, and what they saw, what they put up around their house. And then with regard to the Ten Commandments, some people see that the Ten Commandments is sort of like a table of contents for the book of Deuteronomy. So there's a lot of sections in Deuteronomy that more or less draw out implications and applications from the Ten Commandments, okay? And that's specific, especially in chapters 12 to 26, are kind of that application of the Ten Commandments. The beginning of chapter 12 says, "These are the statutes and rules that you shall be careful to do in the land that the Lord, the God of your fathers, has given you to possess all the days that you live on the earth." Okay, so what I want to do with our time today is look at some of the sections that are drawing out the Ten Commandments in different ways. Some people have said, from this verse to this verse, this is the fifth commandment. From this verse to this verse, it's the sixth commandment. But the problem is, like when you have too much structure, sometimes you force things to say something when really it's referring back to something else. So I'm not trying to make too many like hard divisions. It's these chapters, but there are general groupings. Like this kind of group more or less applies to one commandment more than another. So let's start by looking at chapter 19. Going back a little bit to where we were last week, although we didn't cover this very much. In chapter 19, if you see just the title of your chapter says laws concerning the cities of refuge. Are you all familiar with what the cities of refuge were? Those were cities that if someone not intentionally killed somebody, accidentally killed somebody, they could go and flee to these cities. And they're supposed to be cities kind of all around the area. Okay. Chapter 20 deals with warfare. First, it goes into what if a city is far away, outside of the land? What do you do then? Well, the law was that first you'd offer terms of peace. If they accept it, that's fine. But if they didn't, then you would go to war with them. But what about cities that were within the land? Would they be offered terms of peace before? No, they were not. So those are some of the laws that were applying to warfare. In chapter 21, we get the case of an unsolved murder. So someone's found out in the open country. They don't know who done it, or even who should be responsible in terms of what city. So Deuteronomy even addresses that. So the elders come out and kind of see whose city it's closest to, and then they offer a sacrifice for atonement. They don't know who did it, but there's still atonement that was made on behalf of the people as a whole. In verse 22, can someone read verse 22, verse 8? And before you do that, hopefully you can see kind of loosely how the laws that or these chapters that we've been through so far kind of relate to the law about you shall not murder. So there's laws that govern warfare. There's laws that govern what if you kill somebody but not on purpose, what if there's been a murder but you don't know who did it. So all these are kind of loosely related to this command of not killing or not murdering. But in chapter 22 verse 8, let's see this and see how it might apply to this command of you shall not murder. Okay, can someone read that one verse? Mike?
When you build a new house, make a parapet around your roof, so that you may not bring the guilt of bloodshed on your house if someone falls from the roof.
Okay, so do you all know what a parapet is? It's not two dogs or two cats. What is a parapet?
It's like a handrail.
Okay, yeah, there's some kind of guard around the roof of your house. It's a handrail or maybe a short wall. You probably all have seen. Even some Spanish style homes have kind of a parapet around the outside. So the idea is if you're up there relaxing or entertaining people, and one of your friends is telling a story and accidentally steps too far back and takes a plunge, you're not guilty of that. Why would you be guilty, or why could you be considered guilty if you don't have some kind of guardrail or a small wall?
You're your brother's keeper.
Okay, there's a sense in which you're still responsible for someone else's safety, right? Or someone else's life. So how does that expand or apply the commandment, you shall not murder? Because murder is something very different than building a guardrail, right? Or not building a guardrail. So how do you think that relates to that command of not murdering somebody? Scott?
Well, for us to not murder means we're supposed to recognize that God created man in his own image with a unique value, more than the value of a stick of celery. Like the same way we don't want someone to destroy our celery, we want to value and protect someone else's life. If we create an environment that doesn't put their life as a priority, their health and their welfare as a priority, we're not doing justice to the image of God in that person.
Okay, yeah, well said. So we're seeing how the command not to murder, it doesn't only mean don't go out and kill somebody, right? But there's sort of I don't know if it's a flip side or just maybe a full understanding that it's life that you want to promote.
Yes.
It's not just don't take away life, but you want to promote life. And so if there's something you can do to promote the life of somebody else, like not having a ditch dug in your yard with no warning sign, then you should do that because you want to look out for your brother's life and health as well. Does that make sense? So that's one way that this command of not murdering is bigger than just that one thing. Like if you just looked at the 10 Commandments, you might think, okay, has anybody in here murdered anybody? Okay, can we check that box? We're all good. It's a lot more than that, right? It's about looking out for the benefit and for the blessing of life of others around us. Okay, and if that were the case, if that's what not murdering somebody is, then all of us can think of things that we've done that hasn't promoted the life of other people around us, right? Whether it's from selfishness or all kinds of, host of things that we could think of. Let's go on to chapter 22, and this is a section that's mainly dealing more with the command of you shall not commit adultery. So can someone read 22? This is more or less just a straight statement of the command itself of not committing adultery. Brian's got that? Thanks.
If a man is found lying with the wife of another man, both of them shall die. The man who lay with the woman and the woman. So you shall purge the evil from Israel.
Okay. So there it's, yeah, again, it's kind of a straight statement of you shall not commit adultery. But we also see the severe consequences for it, right? Both of them would be put to death. But there's a lot of in chapter 22, it's looking at other instances of where there might be sexual immorality. So there's a question of what if a woman is engaged to be married and she's raped? That's not adultery, right? And then there's a difference over whether whether this happened in the open country or in the city. Why would it matter if someone's raped in the open country versus in the city?
No one could hear cries for help
Okay.
in this country.
Okay. So there's, whereas in the city, I guess the assumption is that you do hear her crying for help, right? And I guess the inverse of that would be if she's not crying for help, then maybe it wasn't rape in the first place. So it's kind of getting at this, a little bit of trying to discern what really happened and who is at fault, right? Are both at fault, or is it really just the man, the perpetrator of the wickedness? What do you do if that woman was a young woman, a virgin that wasn't engaged to be married? Well, in that case, the man should really take her on as a wife. He should take care of her so that she wouldn't have to carry around this open, shame. So then what would happen if a woman gets married and is accused of not being a virgin when she was married? Well, there's a test for that as well, and there's consequences if that's true, but there's also consequences if it's found not to be true. That a person who makes that accusation can't just throw it out there willy-nilly, right? Can't just be baseless in what they what they accuse the woman of. Okay, so kind of like taking this as a whole, where it's just seeing how important and even how sacred marriage is to God and also to God's people, how it should be treated with care, protection, that it should be it should be stunning if the vows of marriage are violated, whereas today, no fault divorces, it hardly means anything, right? I forget what song it just came to my mind, but basically it says, I'll love you until I stop loving you. That's essentially what they're saying. Thanks a lot. Makes me feel really special to get married to you. So, because of that importance of marriage to God and to his people, there's severe punishment when that's violated, when the sanctity and the sacredness of marriage is violated. But at the same time, we also see that the dignity and the protections of a person who's accused in that way is still protected. Does that make sense? So in other words, you can't just throw around this bomb and whoever is accused blows up, but there's protections in place that they might investigate it and make sure that this really did happen. Okay. Any thoughts or questions about that? It's a little bit of a harder section. John?
Just one comment. James 2:10 says if you've offended in one or broken one of the laws, you've broken them all. We so have divorced ourselves from the concept that the law is completely interwoven For example, Adam broke literally every one of the laws because he did such things as he coveted that which didn't belong to him. He stole it. He didn't honor his true father. And that's essentially with all sin. It's so interwoven with the commandments that you break one, you break all.
Yeah. And we'll see some examples coming up of you really can't isolate it to one command of something that's happened. And of course, before we move on from these cases of adultery, I mean, we remember, of course, what Jesus said about that even if you look at a woman with lust in your heart, that you've committed adultery. But we see even in the Old Testament, there's a heart to it. There's not just this one isolated command or prohibition, but it's just how you see all of marriage and how you see other people. Okay, let's go on to the 8th commandment, which is you shall not steal. Okay, so everybody knows what stealing is. But what I want to do is look at chapter 23, 24, and 25. And think about the commandment of not stealing with what is said here. Can someone read these two verses? John?
If you go into your neighbor's vineyard, you may eat your fill of grapes, as many as you wish, but you shall not put anything in your bag. If you go into your neighbor's standing grain, you may pluck the ears with your hand, but you shall not put a sickle to your neighbor's standing grain.
Okay. So the idea is that you're going into your neighbor's field and you pick an apple to eat, or you pick some grain to eat. Why is that not stealing? I mean, I remember going into my neighbor's yard and taking an apple, and I felt terrible about it, and I did not want my dad to find out. But why would it not be stealing? I mean, why is it even, there's limits put on it, but why would that not be stealing? Do you own the field?
Let's go back to preserving life.
Okay, that's a good thought. How would that, what do you mean by preserving life?
Or maybe if it is, like we were talking about with murder, someone were hungry and were to walk into a field and have to eat something, just continue living,
Mm-hmm.
then that might be okay to do.
Okay,
Jesus and his disciples did that.
yeah, it did.
Also, it's all God's. So the man who owns the fields, but it's kind of like the Jubilee and all those things that it all goes back to God.
Yeah, excellent, Steve.
And you can somewhat tie it in with the whole gleaning idea.
Yeah. In fact, there's a verse coming up with that. Yeah, I think in one sense, is the field, does it belong to that other person? Yes, in a sense, but not completely. And I think, Steve, what you said is right on, that even the things that we own don't fully, completely belong to us, right? That if it can benefit someone else, we shouldn't stand in the way of that. Now, it doesn't mean that the person just comes and takes your whole field. It doesn't mean that they get their combine out and roll up some bales and take home with them. That would sort of be akin to putting them in your bag, right? There's a blessing that you can go in and take things and enjoy it, but don't fill your bag with them. See, there's a difference there, and it's holding both of those values in place. Of the field is given to the other person for them to care for, but it's not exclusively theirs. It's also for the benefit of others. So, yeah, John?
God points out, throughout the Old Testament, you have with reference to harvest. For example, you don't cut down the corners. You leave the corners there. Why? So that the stranger, the poor, people can benefit from that
Yeah.
because it doesn't belong to them.
Yeah. Coming up in chapter 24, just a couple chapters later, it makes that very point that Mike and you said. It says, when you reap your harvest in your field and forget a sheaf in the field, you shall not go back to get it. It shall be for the sojourner, the fatherless, and the widow, that the Lord your God may bless you in all the work of your hands. This is chapter 24, verse 19. When you gather the grapes of your vineyard, you shall not strip it afterwards. It shall be for the sojourner, the fatherless, and the widow. And then back to 20, I skipped that one. When you beat your olive trees, you shall not go over them again. It shall be for the sojourner, the fatherless, and the widow. In other words, when you collect the food from your fields, don't go back and pick every little thing, to get it for you, because that is going to help somebody else who strolls along and is hungry and needs something to eat. Right? Does that make sense? John?
Now, this ties in with the Lord's Prayer too, as Jesus said, give us our daily bread. This day our daily bread. He said, not tomorrow's bread. So for the sojourner and the guy that's hungry, take enough for today. Tomorrow will be supplied some other way.
Okay. Yeah, it's about looking to God as the ultimately the one who gives us each day's provisions, right? Think about the man who built another barn so he could store more of his grain. So question then, how does that apply to us and our possessions? Do we think about our own possessions as being, this is mine, and I can decide who gets what from it? What if someone comes and borrows your car for the afternoon? Is that a example? I don't know.
Yeah.
What do you guys think? Mike?
Yeah, I let somebody borrow my car for a while. But I was going to say, don't withhold your things from someone who is in need so that you can do them good.
Okay. So maybe even with your car, you might be on the lookout for someone who might benefit from that. Okay. So,
And
Scott?
from your time as well.
Ouch.
Yeah, I feel like that's a great point. Like the passage presumes you have something that belongs to you, that is in your possession, of which someone can take it without like doing you harm, right? If you have only one car and it's your way that you must use to get to work in a long commute away, then that's probably not wise to think that that person can come and take your car without that being a violation of this. But if you have two cars and one is sitting and you're like, hey, anybody who wants to use this car, you're leaving your corner of your garage unharvested.
Okay.
Yeah.
Definitely a lot of ways that it would touch our lives that we may not be very comfortable with, I know. One more, John?
When I was a kid, which was a long time ago, my grandparents would leave their car in the open with the keys in it. And of course, it wasn't in Los Angeles. But the reason they did that is because someone might need to use it.
Wow. That's very different, isn't it? Yeah.
Different time.
Yeah. Okay. So maybe an application then is this command to not steal. It also has kind of coupled with it that maybe you shouldn't withhold things from other people that they could use as well. That there's a sense in which withholding something that someone else might benefit from is in a sense stealing from them, because God may be providing that thing that you have for them as well. There was one more I wanted to bring out, which was the passage about and this is chapter 24, verse 15. It says, you shall not oppress a hired worker who is poor and needy, whether he is one of your brothers or one of the sojourners that's within one of your towns. You shall give him his wages on the day before the sun sets, for he is poor and counts on it, lest he cry against you to the Lord and you be guilty of sin. That's what I meant to say before that last statement, was that there's a sense in which stealing can also be withholding something that's due someone else, right? So I think about that. The other day, the guy who is under me at work put in an expense report. And this first came to mind because I've just been reading about it. I'm like, I need to approve that right away because that's money that's due to him, right? I don't want to sit on this like I might sit on another email for a couple of days until I'm able to get to it. That's the first thing I want to do, is take care of him. So there's lots of ways that this applies, but let's just think about the ways that God's provided for us. That's not just meant to be isolated to us. It's meant to be shared with others as well. Okay, let's move on to the 9th commandment, which is about not bearing false witness. The section in here that people refer to, there's maybe one or two, but I think it's pretty loose. This is one of those ones I don't think you can really isolate that 9th commandment to one particular section. However, when we think about the command not to bear false witness, we probably usually think of not lying, and maybe more particularly, not accusing someone falsely of things. But I also want to look at another way that Deuteronomy brings out the way we use our words, because bearing false witness is about using words, right? And the importance that your words be true, that they mean something that's enduring. Can someone read 21 to 23? Right there. We get a soundtrack with this one. All right. Okay. 21 to 23.
If you make a vow to the Lord your God, you shall not delay fulfilling it. For the Lord your God will surely require it of you, and you will be guilty of sin. But if you refrain from vowing, you will not be guilty of sin. You shall be careful to do what has passed your lips, for you have voluntarily vowed to the Lord your God what you have promised with your mouth.
Okay. So again, this just reminds us that our words matter, that our words shouldn't be false when we speak them. They shouldn't be not just accusing someone else falsely, but our words should be true. That when we say, for instance, when we say we're going to do something, when we make a vow, that we follow through on it. We don't just say things flippantly. Yeah.
It's more than just words, it's action.
Mm-hmm.
Because if I say I'm a Christian and I fail to be a good testimony, I'm not willing always to give an answer to every man that asks me for reason for offending. That is bearing false witness against God, to whom I have pledged my allegiance.
Okay, so there's a truth that should accord with our words in our whole life. Everything we do should be consistent, or holding the truth to be important. There's another passage that I want to look at that it's kind of a combination of lying and stealing. And maybe background, when my dad retired from he worked for like 35 years at this one job. He got to retire when I think he was 55, which is, I'm almost there. Like I could retire if I was my dad almost. But then he had a second career, actually a couple second, third, fourth careers, but he was the Morgan County Weights and Measures Inspector. You guys know what a weights and measures inspector is? When you go get produce at the grocery store, there should be a little sticker on the scale that says this is certified to be true. When you get gas at the gas station, you should, if you look, you'll see a sticker there that says like Los Angeles County Weights and Measures Inspector. What that is it's an assurance that the scale that they're using has been tested and is true. Okay, so that's what my dad did. Is he'd go around to different gas stations or different grocery stores and test their scales, and then he'd write the little sticker and put on there, which was perfect for my dad because he's a straight guy. Like, yeah, that's I can talk a lot about my dad. The older I get, the more I appreciate him, want to be like him. I never did want to be like him, but I see how hard it is to be a man like him, now that I'm his age. But here in Deuteronomy, we see this same principle being spoken against. In other words, don't set your scales falsely. And we're going to see a passage here in 25:13. It's not just about scales being false, but it's going to talk about using two different weights, like a heavy weight and a light weight. So can someone read these couple verses here in Deuteronomy 25? John Kortenhoven, would you mind reading that? You've got it.
You shall not have in your bag two kinds of weights, a large and a small. You shall not have in your house two kinds of measures, a large and a small. A full and fair weight you shall have, a full and fair measure you shall have, that your days may be long in the land of the Lord your God is giving you. For all who do such things, all who act dishonestly, are an abomination to the Lord your God.
Okay. So that's what we read in Deuteronomy. There's a lot of proverbs about this too. There's at least 3 or 4 that talk about the Lord hates a dishonest scale, right? Never mind. So can you think of examples today where we might not have two weights that we're using, but can you think of examples where you might overweight something in one instance, but in another circumstance, the very same thing you're underweighting? Can you think of examples where you might effectively use two different weights?
Let's say your spouse wants to do one thing, but you want to do another.
Okay.
And you're going to discuss it. You might put more weight on your arguments for doing your thing.
Okay. And the next day, maybe you want to do the other thing, and so you underweight the one argument. That's a really good one. It's interesting because it's not a physical thing that we're weighing. I even think about if you have. Never mind. I'm not going to go into that. But you had another.
So just the way you hold people accountable with things, right? Like maybe taking your spouse again, you might think, oh, it's okay if my spouse does this, but if my kid does this, or if my friend does this, or if somebody I don't care for as much does this, then oh, that's bad.
Okay. Yeah, holding people to different standards. Yeah.
James puts it well in James 2. You have the man coming in with the shabby clothes and the man coming in with gold. And what do? You discriminate.
Yeah.
That's the same thing.
Yeah, there's a preference that we're showing. And Dick, you had your hand up.
Does this obviate any believer from being a politician?
Well, we need good, godly politicians. So it's difficult.
It's difficult, isn't it?
Yeah, it would be because you know your opponent's coming.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's part of how politics works, is that you're trying to get the most of what you're trying to get, knowing that you have to compromise at some point. So that's very difficult. Brian, did you have your hand up? Oh, no, sorry. All right. Kaylin, sorry.
This is similar to what Jen and Scott were saying, but I'm feeling very convicted because so often we excuse our own situation or for our own reasons, or we get why we did it, but judge somebody else for theirs, and that judgment is using a different weight when somebody else is doing it than when we.
Yeah, so I like all these examples because it's showing that we're assessing things according to what benefits this the best, right? Whether it's a false scale in a supermarket, or whether it's an argument or a testimony. So very interesting, because it it removes the standard of your value on something away from yourself to hopefully something that's more objective, right? Like you want 1 pound to weigh 1 pound, no matter where you weigh it. So, John, last one, and we're going to move on.
Yeah, the one thing I keep noticing of all these examples, most of them say that your days may be long.
Yeah.
The land the Lord gives you, it reminds you of the fifth commandment, of course, honor your parents, that your days may be long. And here's honor the commandments that God has given you, and it will go well for you.
Yeah, I'm glad you picked up on that, because that is all over Deuteronomy.
Yeah.
There's, I think, 10 or 15 times where it's said. And it's not just, obey these things so that you'll be miserable, or you'll at least be blameless, but it's so that it will go well with you. Like things go well with us when we live this way. And I think that's the thing that we need to remember about God's commands, is that they are for his glory. They're a perfect reflection of his character. And when we follow his commands, when we walk in his ways, it gives glory to him. And at the same time, it's good for us. It prolongs our own.
We were made to obey.
Yeah.
The authorities should be obeyed. That's how we flourish.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, let's move on. There is one more thing about God's laws that I want to get into. And we've touched on this already, but the idea that they go beyond just the command. They don't leave the commandments behind. It's not like you get a principle from those things, but you don't really obey those things. Like I think sometimes people today can look at the whole Bible that way. They take it, well, we get our good principles from this of loving each other, but we don't really take specifics. No, we take specifics as well. But there's also principles that we see that are kind of behind these commands that we also want to follow. Jesus put it this way when he was talking to the Pharisees and scribes in Matthew 23. He says, you tithe mint and dill and cumin, the things that you should have done, and have neglected the weightier matters of the law, which are justice and mercy and faithfulness. These things you ought to have done without neglecting the others. You blind guides, straining out a gnat and swallowing a camel. We want to remember the details of what God's commanded, but keep in mind that there's a weightier thing behind these commands of being faithful, of being the way he says that there's principles of mercy and justice and love behind these laws, the way that we carry them out. So I'm going to look at this one last passage in chapter 24, so you can turn there and get ready. So here's the picture. Someone's going to borrow some money from you, and to make sure that they're going to pay you back, they're going to give you something, a token, something not quite the same value, but it's a pledge. So you're about to give your brother some money for him to get by on. He's going to go get something for you as a pledge, and you're going over to his house to get that pledge. So this passage is that picture of you're with the person you're about to give this money to. They're about to give you something, but it's a very curious passage. So can someone read Deuteronomy 24, 10 to 13? This is going to be our last one for today.
When you make your neighbor a loan of any sort, you shall not go into his house to collect his pledge. You shall stand outside, and the man to whom you make the loan shall bring the pledge out to you. As he's a poor man, you shall not sleep in his place. You shall restore to him the pledge as the sun sets, that he may sleep in his cloak and bless you. And it shall be a righteousness for you before the Lord your God.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Post. So when you go to collect the pledge, you shouldn't go into the man's house. Why? What's up with that idea of not going into the man's house when he's going to go in and get the pledge for you?
I think it could be to not see what else he has.
Okay. You're onto something. So if you see other things that he has, what might that do? Or okay, there could be coveting. Yeah, Jen?
Protect his dignity.
Okay, how would that protect his dignity, you think?
Well, if he doesn't have much and you're going in there to collect.
Okay.
He does have.
Okay. So yeah, so there's the person's dignity that's at stake. There's coveting that's being protected against. Anything else?
Like you're questioning whether he really needs it or not.
Yeah, there's that too. The more you think about it, the more you, it's odd almost that you'd stay outside, but the more you think about it, the more you see the wisdom of it. That, you know, when you go into the house, all those things that you said were true. But, you know, what if you're going to go in and he says, well, I'm going to give you this music stand here. And you're like, I don't really want the music stand. How about the piano instead? like you don't know. You don't know what the man needs every day. You don't know what he cherishes every day. It might be, you know, the piano might be from his great grandma, and it just break his heart to part with that. You don't know those things. So it's just interesting that in God's word, it says that when you're collecting your pledge, don't go into the man's house. And as you think about it, you see all these other reasons. And the thing that I liked about here is that it's showing that even in the right collection of a pledge, there's still, like Jen said, there's a dignity that you give to the other person. That it's not just a bald go in and, you know, take the pledge. There's other things that are at play that you want to protect as well. And hopefully we've seen in all of these laws that there's that the dignity of people, as someone said earlier, that people who are made in God's image is always behind and infused and surrounding these laws that God has for us. So I hope that you see that point today, that maybe the 2 points are Deuteronomy kind of fleshes out the 10 commandments that it's meant to be applied to every part of life. But also God's commands are always remembering the dignity of people. It's not just the bald laws or prohibitions, but it's taking into account that there's a person there that's made in God's image that we're responding to. So anyway, thank you all for a good discussion. Let me close in prayer. Father, again, we thank you for your word. And I pray, Lord, that as we meditate on these things, that you would help us see areas of our life where we could be more pleasing to you the way we live. Lord, help us to see our sin. Help us to repent of those, that we might be pleasing to you, that we might be a blessing to our brother, and that our own days may be prolonged in your presence. In Jesus' name, amen.
Very nicely done. Lord bless you and keep you and make his face shine upon you. Have a blessed Lord's Day and time of worshiping with us on Zoom. Take care. God bless. Ending the